welcome to episode 15 of My Life as a Critic. I am professional film critic Sean Patrick, and on this show I critique my own work, and the movies obviously are part of that. Rewatch the movies, re-review them from a hopefully more mature and better perspective, more professional perspective. Look back on 15, 16, 17 years worth of being a film critic, on the radio, online, and mostly the stuff I'm going back to my online reviews, which is back in my amateur days when I was just one of those guys who just went on the internet and wanted to write movie reviews. And that's the best education I can recommend for anybody who wants to become a film critic, is just watch lots of movies and write about them. I mean, that's really how you do it. Don't put pressure on yourself to be a professional from the very beginning, because you're going to suck at first. Now, granted, I found that I started off really well and then kind of lingered a little bit because mostly I got into the radio critic stuff, and becoming a radio critic is different because it's much more faster paced. It's to the point. Your critique has to be within under 3 minutes at most. You got to keep it under 3 minutes because that's the amount of time that you're going to get on whatever station that you're on. You try and go over that, and people start to lose. The point is trying to get back to the commercials and the show, and you don't want to be too much of a distraction. If it's good content, it can go as long as you want. But generally speaking, when it comes to movie reviews, you want to keep them, especially radio reviews, in my experience, you want to keep them no more than 3 minutes, because that's what your audience wants. They want a bite-sized thing where they can get in and out and on to the next thing, especially when you're just a feature part. Like it's not a show. If it's a show like this one and your job is to talk about the movie the entire time, then that's fine. And if a segment is defined as, you're going to come on and do 15 minutes with us, then, then makes sense. But if you're just a feature, most oftentimes features on other people's shows, you don't want to take over the show and run things for 5, 6, 7 minutes. You want to do it quickly. And so 3 minutes is, generally speaking, the amount of time that you have for a radio review, and it doesn't necessarily allow for a great deal of depth or introspection. You can't really talk about yourself or your personal reaction to the movie. You need to get in, describe the film, give your feelings, and get out. That's the main thing a radio reviewer does. And so that kind of affected the way I wrote, and it kind of affected who I am as a critic. I had to take on a new perspective, and kind of, whereas I could write, back 10, 15 years ago, I could write 800, 900 words about any movie I wanted. I had to now cut down to, whatever I could get in 3 minutes. And most of the time I was doing it extemporaneously. And it's fun to do. I mean, I do this show pretty much extemporaneously. So, I mean, you can sense I have a lot of fun doing it this way. But it does change the way you write about movies and the depth with which you can speak of them. So that's another reason why I love doing this show, is that I can go into a little bit more depth and kind of treat it like one of my old written reviews. Today we're going to talk about a movie I remember really liking a lot, that I believe I still really like a lot, although I haven't actually seen it in 10 years. V for Vendetta. Hugo Weaving, Natalie Portman. Natalie Portman has a weird habit of being the superhero's girlfriend, or at least the superhero's love interest, or just the girl in a superhero movie. I mean, it's V for Vendetta and Thor are the only examples, but I mean, it's like they don't want to choose her to be the hero of any movie. They want to get somebody else, even if it's Hugo Weaving, who's not nearly as much of a star as she is, or even Chris Hemsworth, who's not as big a star as she is. I don't know. Is it a complex on her part where she doesn't feel she's important enough to be the star of a superhero movie, and then she ends up dominating the movie anyway, because she is, whether she likes it or not, the bigger star, even as she's not the superhero. Let's take a look now. I'll read you my review of V for Vendetta from 2006 for a website called smart-popcorn.com. Once again, I'll thank the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, web.archive.org, where I've been able to find much of my history as a film critic, as most of the sites I've written for are no longer in existence. So I really appreciate archive.org, just luckily having a large amount of my personal criticism online. Here's my review. The most controversial movie of 2006 has arrived. V for Vendetta, based on the graphic novel by Alan Moore, has been accused of subversion and supporting a terrorist agenda. The question then must be, does V for Vendetta put forth a terrorist agenda? The answer, because this is such a wonderfully smart and complex film, is yes and no. Yes, the character of V, portrayed by Hugo Weaving, uses terrorist tactics, and his goals are most definitely subversive. However, in this dystopian vision of the future, V's reign of terror is aimed at a totalitarian government that can only be fought with guerrilla or terrorist tactics. Those who can think with both sides of their brain will understand this complex division of ideas. For the myopic and agenda-driven, however, V for Vendetta is a threatening shot across the bow. In the year 2020, England has fallen under the sway of a militaristic dictator named Adam Sutter, played by John Hurt. Exploiting a tragedy that killed hundreds of thousands in the early years of the 21st century, Sutter was able to impose his dictatorship by playing on the fears of society, especially fears of the kind of chaos that had thrown the U.S. in this vision of the future into a wildly violent civil war. The new English dictator censors all art forms and removed or edited British history to match the new dictator's worldview. However, one thing he cannot censor is a bizarre masked character calling himself V, played by Hugo Weaving. Hiding behind a grinning porcelain veneer of the 17th century English terrorist Guy Fawkes, V strolls the darkened streets of London, righting the injustice and launching masterpieces of violent uprising. In the early hours of the 5th of November, the date that in 1606 Guy Fawkes attempted to blow up Parliament in what was called the gunpowder treason, V has hatched an elaborate plan to wake up the citizens of London to the tyranny of their government. But first, V intercedes when he finds 3 of London's secret police, known as Fingermen, attacking a young woman named Evie, played by Natalie Portman. Saving Evie's life, V invites her to witness his symphony of violence that includes major fireworks and the destruction of the British landmark, the Old Bailey. Later, V tells a captive nationwide audience in a pirate broadcast that 1 year from that date he will blow up Parliament and invites anyone with an issue with the government's fear tactics to join him. In the meantime, V will be exacting revenge on the men who turned him into a masked vigilante, a series of murders all connected to the tragedies that led to Adam Sutter winning power. Stephen Ray plays the head of the British police charged with finding V, who in the process ends up uncovering more than he wants to know about his government. Evie and V have a past that is linked in ways neither is fully aware of. Her parents and younger brother were victims of the plague that gave rise to the current government, as was V. Evie, as played by the lovely Ms. Portman, gives the film its conscience and story arc. Her slow awakening to radicalism and what some would call terrorism is where the film finds its socio-political backbone. At first, she questions V's tactics and motives, giving us in the audience a chance to do so as well. Once she comes around, we likely already have, but it makes for a few of the film's big dramatic moments. The cast of V for Vendetta is sprawling and spectacular from top to bottom. John Hurt perfectly embodies the vengeful, power-hungry Chancellor. His presence also offers the ironic humor of his having played protagonist Winston Smith in Orwell's 1984, now graduated to playing Big Brother. Stephen Fry appears all too briefly as a talk show host, Evie's closest friend, and a man with a deep secret that provides yet another deep and abiding principle that the writers Larry and Andy Wachowski wish to exploit. Many nods to the British stage also mark this cast, from Timothy Pigott-Smith as the Chancellor's hatchet man, to Rupert Graves as Ray's detective partner, to Roger Allam as an unctuous TV commentator who evinces more than a little Rush Limbaugh in his bombastic oratory. Written by Andy and Larry Wachowski, V for Vendetta has the excitement of the Matrix films, but with a bigger brain. Directed by Matrix second unit director James McTeague in his feature debut, V for Vendetta is also visually accomplished as the Matrix pictures. High praise for a first-time director. I don't mean to imply that V for Vendetta is superior to the Matrix, though it is superior to the lackadaisical sequels. What separates V for Vendetta is the ideas behind it. There are a myriad of interpretations of exactly what the Wachowskis were attempting to say with this picture. When V for Vendetta debuted as a graphic novel from Alan Moore, it was an allegory for the Margaret Thatcher administration in England in the 80s. Updated to our times, some see this version of V for Vendetta as veiled attacks on either George W. Bush, Tony Blair, or both. If you want to follow that line, you can, but V for Vendetta is not that simple to pin down. Yes, there are references to America's war leading to the chaos of this future society. Director James McTeague also makes an obvious visual reference to the Abu Ghraib prisons in Iraq. But the film is more accurately an attack on a government out of control in the way absolute power corrupts absolutely. The film's ideology could be compared with the logic offered by the National Rifle Association in America, which posits that the people have the right to bear arms, so that if the government ever became a threat, the people could fight back. V for Vendetta takes that theory to a particular conclusion as the people of Britain, led by V, begin to fight back against the tyrannical leadership. Yes, V's tactics and ideas could be defined as terrorism. When V talks of blowing up a building, when he talks of how blowing up a building can be a revolutionary act, you cannot help but make the queasy connection to 9/11. That, however, is not necessarily the context for V for Vendetta. Taken specifically within the guidelines of the plot, this line of logic from V is merely the only way for the people to fight back against a government run amok. Think of it in the terms of North Koreans rising to blow up symbols of dictator Kim Jong-il, or the people of Iraq attacking Saddam's palaces, and you have a better corollary to the mindset of V for Vendetta. V for Vendetta is bathed in coolness from beginning to end. The reflected glory of rebellious writer Alan Moore should inspire fanboys, despite Moore's disassociating himself from the film after reading the script. Then there are the Wachowskis, whose cache of cool remains intact despite the mixed results of the Matrix sequels and the brothers' personal stories, which have made for some interesting tabloid fodder. The film's outlaw spirit and exceptionally well-staged violence are the big draws, and they do not disappoint. V for Vendetta is exciting, thought-provoking, and darkly humorous. The film encompasses the ideas of revolutionary politics and righteous martial arts violence in ways we have never seen before on film, and that makes it at once relevant, anti-establishment filmmaking, and kick-ass blockbuster action movie. All right, that's a kind. I mean, there's a lot of really tough paragraphs in there, but some of this is meant to be just written and read as opposed to read aloud as I'm doing it. So I think I'm actually pretty okay with the way this review went. There's one more paragraph here. If watching a movie can be a revolutionary act, then V for Vendetta could inspire generations. Not inspire them to blow up buildings, but rather to watch closer for the signposts of corruption and fear-mongering, which many fear are already being seen throughout the free world. V for Vendetta is powerful filmmaking with the punch of social commentary wrapped in the popcorn goodness of the mainstream blockbuster. This is one of the best films you'll see in 2006. 1,300 words, that review, by the way. I used to be able to really, really pack the words in there. I really enjoyed writing back in the day. I still do enjoy it today, but you get older, you get more distracted. You find that you have adult things to do, and you don't have 3 hours to dedicate to a 1,300-word essay on a comic book movie. Not to dismiss V for Vendetta as a comic book movie, because there seems to be a lot more to it than that. I'm wondering, because I did definitely pick up on the Bush administration allusions throughout this movie. I wonder how that'll play today. That's going to be the interesting part for me. As for my review, I'm really happy with the ideas there and the way I expressed them. I mean, I didn't find any obvious failures. I didn't find any. I mean, a couple of paragraphs are a little bit heavy, a little bit wordy. But overall, I mean, I think it kind of worked. I could probably followed up on that NRA thing a little bit heavier, probably gone into that a little bit deeper. But other than that, this is a pretty good review. I'm pretty happy with it. And 1,300 words, man. Boy, I tell you, that was something. I didn't realize just how long this review was going to be. But I'm pretty happy with what I wrote. Let's see if what I wrote actually holds up after I watch the movie again. You're listening to My Life as a Critic, episode 15, and we're talking about V for Vendetta. And it'll be just a few moments for you, but for me, I'm going to watch the movie now. Yes, V for Vendetta has changed for me a little bit. I mean, when I first saw it, I saw it as an allegory to the times, the people who disagreed with the Bush administration. They disagreed with Tony Blair going along with the Bush administration as he did. And the allegory seemed simple to me. 10 years later, without that allegory underneath it, V for Vendetta still has a power to it. It still has an emotional resonance to it that's really strong. The characters are very resonant, and especially it's not so much V or even Evie for that matter. It's the characters who risk their lives or do things that put themselves in harm's way and wind up paying the price for the corrupt government at the center of the story. Removing the allegory, you still find a story of government corruption in a universe that maybe you don't recognize it as much as you might have 10 years ago, but one that still is in and of itself creates a believable sort of reality, a universe of its own that has its own emotional and intellectual resonance. I really bought into this totalitarian state and those who were willing to stand up against it. The storylines that are striking to me are the one that really stands out is this little girl who seems to have been inspired by V, and once he sends out the masks, the Guy Fawkes masks, which he sends out near the end of the film to everybody who would like to stand with him on November the 5th and stand up against corruption. She's wearing that in public, and one of the political soldiers, the guards, if you will, the secret police, shoots her in the back as she's running away. And it's a powerful scene. It hits you so hard. And the immediate aftermath of people emerging from their homes to attack the man who attacked this little girl. It's a really powerful and resonant scene. And then, of course, the other one that really stands out is after Evie is captured, or seemingly captured, and it turns out, obviously, spoiler alert, she wasn't captured. The story that V weaves into her incarceration about the lesbian woman whose life was taken from her because she was a lesbian. This totalitarian government does not tolerate difference of any kind, if you will, and she's imprisoned, and she tells Evie her story in this series of messages through the wall, and it is so powerful and it's so emotional, and that is a really beautifully well-told story. Speaking of beautiful, of course, this film is filled with a number of beautiful visuals, not least of which is that extraordinary end fight scene between V and Critic and the secret police that is just really visually stunning. It's extraordinarily violent, but the way in which McTeague shot it is just so gorgeous. The slow motion blood letting is, as disturbing as that is, it's also extraordinarily beautiful. There are other moments in this movie that also capture just, the beauty. Like I was mentioning before, the lesbian character, she has a couple of moments where the pictures of her and the photography of her, it looks as if it's from a different film, this extraordinarily beautiful art picture, if you will. Really impressive stuff. There are problems that emerge now when you look back on it and you see this film from a perspective of a more mature film critic, and you look for, you're more capable of seeing flaw in things that you enjoy. I found Evie's decision to walk away from V after her incarceration, I found that to be odd, because really, where could she go? And they try to gloss over that, but it seems like a pretty big flaw in the story, being that she was a very wanted terrorist at one point, and all she's done is basically had her head shaved. And that's going to be enough for her to not stand out. It seemed a little bit far-fetched. And the Stephen Fry subplot was one that really kind of struck me wrong this time. He plays a character who is Evie's friend, and he decides that he's going to stand up against the government by essentially making fun of the Chancellor, the John Hurt character, and doing so using the character sort of the Guy Fawkes mask, the appearance of V, as sort of a mocking thing, using the Benny Hill soundtrack, that kind of stuff. It's a funny scene, but I mean, it seems pretty obvious from the first moment that he decides to do it that he's endangered both his life and Evie's in doing so. And in retrospect, it seems like a really poor decision on his part. And considering all that he has on the line, especially, and not to mention at the time he's hiding Evie. So he risked his own life and hers just for this one bit to try and mock the government. I get it. It's a brave and bold move on the character's part, but it was one that was destined to end badly for him, and plot-wise, it doesn't seem to have made much sense. Putting that aside, though, there's still so much more that's so resonant about this film. The political themes about standing up against a political, a totalitarian regime, a regime that is using fear to try and control people. I don't want to say that the Bush administration ever did that. I don't want to get into politics. I've given up on politics, frankly. Politics have only ever ruined my life. They've only ever made me angry and bitter and sad and just made me argue with people I care about. And I just don't enjoy politics anymore. I used to be fiery on one side of the debate. Now I just don't pay attention, and I don't want to. But at the time, I believed that the Bush administration was using fear tactics to try and control people and keep them voting for the Bush administration. But really, that's just silly. That's just a conspiracy theory, and I can't go along with any kind of conspiracy theories. I don't like the policies of the Bush administration, but several years on now, 8 years past that, I don't care anymore. I really don't, and I just want peace and quiet, and I just don't want to argue with anybody anymore. I know that's probably more immature than anything. I have my beliefs, I do, and I have a particular slant that I'm always probably going to have, but I don't share it anymore because I just don't want to have that conversation anymore. I'm tired. And while a movie like this does inspire a political discussion and political discourse, 10 years later, it's less so. It becomes more of a movie now. It becomes more of an adventure. And the film takes on a more closed universe, less of a representative or metaphoric universe. It has its own place in the world now, its own world that it's created. And within that world is an extraordinarily powerful adventure that is also a political allegory. And within that framework of being just a movie, I still find so much power and so much resonance in V for Vendetta. This, and similarly, is the way I found it as a direct metaphor when it actually came out back in 2006. It's one of the few films at that time that was willing to step up and actually make a political point, and I do appreciate it having done that, and I appreciate it still today. But I think I appreciate this film even more now as just a movie, as just an adventure, as just a comic book story with this extraordinary comics character at the center. It's surprising to me that James McTeague hasn't gone on to do much else. His movies have not stood out since V for Vendetta. But and obviously we all know which way the Wachowskis went, toward a more weird way that they've gone. Not personally, I'm not talking about their personal lives. Their personal lives are extraordinary. In their private stories, the bravery and the heart that they've shown in stepping up and being who they are is extraordinary. I'm talking about their movies, which I like Speed Racer, but everything else has just gone in a very odd, and Jupiter Ascending and Cloud 9 are just weird, bizarre movies that to me are just a gigantic waste of time. I wish they would make a movie more like The Matrix or V for Vendetta again, but I just don't see it. They've got some very odd artistic drives and way too much money at hand to bring their bizarre visions to life. But again, I want to make clear, I'm not talking about their personal lives in any way when I say that they're weird. I'm saying that their movies are weird, not them. In their personal lives, they're extraordinary because they've been so brave and so open about who they are, and I do appreciate that always. That bravery and that heart that they've shown privately is absolutely beautiful. Their movies, on the other hand, stink. I'm saying they just do. I wish they would get behind another V for Vendetta or The Matrix. But McTeague, I wish he would try and do something like this. I off the top of my head, I can't even tell you what he's done since V for Vendetta. I knew Hugo Weaving probably wasn't going to get many opportunities. He's a character actor, and that's pretty much what he's been doing since then, is character pieces, and that makes sense. Natalie Portman, on the other hand, seems to fight stardom. She just doesn't want to be a star. She wants to do so much more, and I appreciate that, but she could have been so much bigger than she is. She could have been one of the biggest stars in the world, one of the biggest draws in the world. She could have been Jennifer Lawrence. She seems to have chosen not to be, specifically not to be, in the movies she's decided to make over the years. And I can appreciate that kind of bold personal vision, but also I can't help but be a little bit disappointed that there could have been so much more from her. But at least we do have her role in V for Vendetta, which is so beautiful and so well acted, and she's not just the love interest. She's not just the object of his affection. She's a very resonant part of this universe that the film creates and executes, and her voiceover at the end is extraordinarily powerful, as is her journey throughout the film, and especially her incarceration during the movie has a real emotional power to it. So I do appreciate that, and I can't help but 10 years later wonder what might have been if she'd have made other choices in different directions that could have made her an even bigger star than she is. Well, this has been episode 15 of My Life as a Critic. Thank you so much for listening to my V for Vendetta episode, and we'll be back with another one as soon as possible.